Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jillian Saul, and I am staff for the APA Virginia chapter. We will get started in just a moment. I'm just going to wait a few more seconds for folks to join. Alrighty. Well, we are just afternoon and we have a good number of folks already here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to save our formal introductions for Leah Eppinger, the president of the Pennsylvania chapter of APA, who will be introducing all of our speakers. But this is this month's Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration webinar, Planning for a Resilient, Sustainable, and Innovative Agricultural Future. You will see the CM number indicated here on this slide, but I will also share that number in the chat box momentarily. Just a few housekeeping and logistical items. We really do encourage questions. Please submit your questions through the Q&A box. That will just help us keep track of all inquiries. You can also use the chat feature during some of our more open-ended questions that will come up in just a moment from our speakers. During the formal Q&A towards the end, if you have any questions that you'd prefer to ask out loud, you're certainly able to do so. Just use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted. I will take note of that, and I will allow speaking abilities. One other item, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared to our MAPC YouTube page, where you can find all previously recorded webinars in the series. And I will also share links to our website and to that YouTube page in the chat. So keep your eyes peeled there in just a moment. But I'm going to hand it over to Leah to formally introduce this great panel that we have.
Thanks, Jillian. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, I guess, by a minute or so. And welcome to today's webinar. My name is Leah Eppinger, and I am the president of the PA-APA chapter, and I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for this important and timely discussion. Before we dive in, I'd like to extend my thanks to our planning committee, whose hard work and dedication has made this event possible. I also want to express my gratitude to our esteemed panelists for joining us today and generously sharing their insights and expertise. As we all know, agriculture stands at the crossroads of some of the most pressing global challenges: climate change, food security, and resource sustainability. Today's discussion is an opportunity to explore solutions and strategies that not only address these challenges, but also pave the way for a thriving agricultural sector that benefits the people and the planet alike. To kick this webinar off, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. We will have an overview of the resilience topic, followed by local case studies. Our speakers today are Nancy Nunn. Nancy Nunn is the Assistant Director of the Hughes Center for Agroecology, a 501c3 affiliated with the University of Maryland's College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. In this role, she works closely with diverse stakeholders to identify solutions for complex issues facing our communities. Examples of her engagement include the coordination of regional watershed implementation plan workshops, the local government exchanges, and most recently, Climate Smart Agriculture Project. Nancy has been a member of the Hughes Center staff for 17 years and played a variety of roles. She currently serves as co-chair of Maryland's Food System Resiliency Council, which provides her the opportunity to interact with stakeholders from all sectors of food system. She earned her BA in political science and MA in history at Washington College. Next, we have Jennifer Clifford. She is the program manager for New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets and the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee's Climate Resilient Farming Program, guiding 58 county soil and water conservation districts. The Conservation Committee also administers the state's agriculture environmental management, agricultural non-point source abatement and control, and the state aid to soil and water conservation districts programs. Mike Roth serves as the Director of Conservation and Innovation at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and a Pittsburgh native. He acquired his BA in Environmental Studies from Washington and Jefferson College and an MA in Public Administration from the University of Pittsburgh. After graduate school, Michael joined the AmeriCorps to serve as a resilience AmeriCorps Vista, focusing on community preparedness. In 2019, Michael was selected to be a William Penn Fellow with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to work in the Department of Agriculture on the policy team. During this 2-year fellowship, Michael interacted with numerous topics focused on climate change, industrial hemp, and food security. His work aims to bridge the gap between agriculture and interrelated topics like energy, technology, and national security. Michael lives in Harrisburg area where he enjoys spending time outdoors and visiting local farms. And last but certainly not least, Susan Perry is the Assistant State Conservationist for the partnerships under Pennsylvania's USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Her responsibilities include overseeing the PA NRCS easement staff, which includes both acquisition and stewardship management under agricultural land preservation programs, supervising and leading the PA NRCS state outreach team, including public affairs staff and state outreach coordinator. Susan serves as the NRCS point of contact for the urban agriculture in PA, as well as manages multiple grants and cooperative agreements conducted to support the work of private sector partners. In her 25th year of employment with USDA NRCS, previous work includes serving as a natural resources specialist on our eco science team, for which she was certified conservation planner. Prior to that time, Susan served in the lead role as a resource conservation and development coordinator for 7 counties in the South Central region of the Commonwealth. So before I turn it over to Nancy for her presentation and to kick off this webinar, we'd like to put up a poll question so we can better get to know who is here in the audience. So you should all see a poll question coming up on the screen. We'll give everyone a chance to vote.
Alrighty, well, we are at about 85% completion rate, so I will share the results.
Jillian. Great, so we have mostly local government, it seems, a little state government, some private consultants, others, if you put other, please let us know in the chat who you are, as well as some regional planning bodies. So we have a nice cross-section of the field, which is great. We will be also putting a couple open-ended questions in the chat. Please feel free to check those out and answer them at your the best time for you during this webinar. 2 questions are, what are you hoping to get out of this webinar? And how are you working with the agricultural community? So when you have a chance, please jump into the chat and give us your answers. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Nancy to get us started. And I will pull up your presentation.
So thank you, Leah, and the planning community for inviting me to participate in this presentation. We at the Hughes Center have always had a great working relationship with the planning community and recognize the role that you play with so many of the issues that we deal with. And with that said, I will also say I appreciate the complexity of your role as you work in trying to balance all of the issues that you deal with and the unintended consequences that sometimes occur. So with that said, Leah, if you can go to the next slide. Just to give you a little bit of background about the Hughes Center for Agroecology, we were founded in 1999. The whole premise of the Hughes Center is that we were founded with the idea that you bring diverse stakeholders to a convening to hear the different perspectives, understand their viewpoints, where they're coming from, to identify the issues and then to find a solution. And we have always held to that premise. All of our work is based in science. And we don't propose policy, but we do work with policymakers by providing them with our findings and saying, this is what we have found out about this issue. We hope that you will look at it and provide a solution that is based on science. Our mission is to provide leadership to promote environmentally sound and economically viable agriculture and forestry as Maryland's preferred land use. We are governed by a 19-member board. It's a very diverse board. I can hear some of you probably moaning as you hear that and say, how do you ever come to a consensus? But again, we rely on that to have those diverse viewpoints. Our mission's accomplished through a three-prong approach. We fund scientific research related to issues. We also do a lot of outreach. As Leah said in my bio, we were responsible for the WIP workshops that were held regionally throughout Maryland. We also have worked closely with the planning community on local government exchanges to bring speakers into the different areas. For collaboration, we do collaborate with state agencies, we collaborate with local governments, we collaborate with Alliance for the Bay, LGAC, the planning community to provide these outreach services. Next. So the next slide is really for you. As we go through today's presentations, I wanted to ask you to reflect on what the terms resilient, sustainable, and innovative mean to both you and your communities. Sounds like a simple exercise. I know that when we did this exercise with the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council, resilient meant something different to almost everyone in the room. So I think it's really an important exercise to think about as you plan for the future and look at how you can address your problems. I also wanted to ask you, how do you envision your community in the future? And what role do you think your local agriculture will play in that process and in the future of your communities? Next, please. So I want to provide some basic background about agriculture in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Looking at the most recent census, as well as the pages from the different departments of ag, you can see that the number of farms and the acreage is quite large in our area. Now, I am going to preface that with these numbers may not reflect, as noted, may not all be in the Chesapeake watershed region of your state, but you can see the breadth of our agriculture community and also the amount that is involved, the amount of acreage, the amount of industry. What I did leave off of this slide, which I think is equally important, is the economic return from agriculture in each of our states. Next, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that the Hughes Center is involved in right now. And part of this is I focused on Maryland because Maryland otherwise is not represented on this panel, but it's also the state that I'm most familiar with. We're in the midst of a climate smart agriculture project. It's a 2-year state funded project, and the framework for this was a result of requests from our Maryland General Assembly to look at how agriculture is coping with climate change and also how it plans to adapt to climate change. The objective of this project is to determine our current state of Maryland's agriculture and provide information which can assist both the agencies, the state agencies, and producers to prepare and adapt. And the project is really divided into 2 segments. One is a University of Maryland research team, which is looking at the different categories listed on this slide. And the other is a project leadership team. And that project leadership team is composed of members from the Hughes Center, representatives of University of Maryland, farmers, state agencies, so that we have a broad view. And the major priority in this project is the engagement of Maryland's producers. No one wants a project or a report to come out that concerns them when they have not been involved in it. So that was a major thrust of our project, to involve the producers throughout the project. Next, please. So through a survey and through a series of listening sessions with farmers, we asked them, what are you seeing on your land today? What are you concerned about? What are you doing to adapt to that? What we heard from them regarding what they're seeing on their land is they were seeing crop stress. It could be caused by too much heat, too much water, heat stress on livestock. I can talk about a dairy farmer that I know that said, who actually grazes his dairy cows, and he said, I've started to send them out later in the evening to graze due to the weather. New and increased pest pressure. I think we're all familiar with some of the new pests that we are seeing nowadays. Shifts in planting dates and growing cycles. I couldn't get into the field because the weather was so wet, or I can't get my crops out of the field because the weather's wet. Drought, extensive rainy periods, and increase in storm intensity. I think we're all familiar with what happened in North Carolina, those storms. But besides those, just the regular storms that go through, or I shouldn't say regular, but storms that go through on a more regular basis. Saltwater intrusion, and that has really impacted some of our farmers on the lower eastern shore, and also Virginia's farmers on Delmarva. And the impact on farmers and farm workers. When it's 100 degrees outside, I know we all say that we get hot and have to run back into our offices. But if you're a farm worker or you're accustomed to being out on the fields all day, it's really difficult when you're faced with 100 degrees. Next. So as the farming community deals with or adapts to the new type of weather conditions, what are their challenges? Well, one is the demands on agricultural land for development and other uses. I know in Maryland we have solar, but there are many, many demands on agricultural lands. Another one is the loss of agricultural lands. And the loss, it can mean saltwater intrusion. We do deal with farmers that say, I'm not sure I'll be able to farm this field in 5 years. I'm losing some ground every year on this field. The amount of leased agricultural land, and I'm sure Mike can address that, Jennifer can address that for their appropriate states, but in Maryland, a significant amount of our land is leased. And so therefore, you're not only dealing with the agriculture community and their desire to adapt and perhaps put in conservation practices, you're dealing with a non-operating landowner who may or may not be familiar. Conflicting state or local priorities and policies. There might be climate adaptation, but at the same point, you're looking at clean energy goals. So oftentimes, the agriculture community gets stuck in the middle of those conflicting priorities. Information and education to guide decisions. And we heard this over and over again from our farmers. I know the picture to the right looks a little odd, but it's which direction do I turn in? What information can I trust? And how do I even get started in that search? Current programs that may not fit the current conditions. There may be a certain period of time when a farmer has to put a conservation practice into the ground. Or there may be a time when they have to, harvest their cover crops. And it may not fit into the current weather conditions. Funding to assist with implementing these programs. Technical support. I'm sure those of you who deal with any sort of implementation of practices here, there's not enough technical support to help. Consistent data. One of the things that our researchers found out in the research team was that data had not been consistently collected in a number of areas. And finally, the profitability of a farming operation. I think we need to always remember farming is a business. And unlike myself, the producer will not get a paycheck every 2 weeks. They aren't a salaried employee. So they have to take all of this information into account as they are making decisions related to their business operation. Next is, so I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer, because while climate conditions provide us with many challenges, they also provide many opportunities. One opportunity is for a farmer to consider diversifying their farming operations. And a lot of farmers have taken this opportunity to do that. Another opportunity is to have a place at the table in discussions. That may sound odd, but there are various discussions going on related to clean energy goals, related to development, where the farming community has not always had a place at the table, but now they do. An opportunity to try new technologies and farming practices. We call that, thinking outside of the box, being innovative. I know that the Maryland Department of Agriculture is hosting a technology in farming seminar in 2 weeks. There's a lot of opportunities out there for farmers to use new technologies. New funding opportunities, and funding opportunities in agencies or other methods that may not have occurred before. About 2 weeks ago, I received a phone call from one of Maryland's counties, and they're interested in possibly funding some conservation practices for farmers. New partnerships. On the Eastern Shore, and I think, throughout most of our region, more and more environmental groups are collaborating with farmers in partnerships to address both the ag community's needs, but also their local community's needs. And finally, again, the profitability issue, increasing their profitability and security through security. And when I say security, security of being able to maintain that farm, hold on to that farmland through diversification. Next. So I just want to provide you with a couple of links for activities that are occurring on the ground. This list is in no way complete, but you can see the breadth of the opportunities that are available. There are federal programs, and I know that both Susan and Jennifer are going to address those. There are State Department of Agriculture programs, and the two programs I mentioned are just two of the programs at our State Department in Maryland. And there's also other state agencies, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. They recently issued a proposal for a program that is kicking off this year called the Whole Watershed Grant Program. And that actually is having communities look at watersheds as a whole and addressing conservation needs and programs throughout the whole watershed. At least 2 of the 5 watersheds that will be given grant or awarded grants this year include an agriculture segment to them. Nonprofit organizations' engagement with the agriculture communities. Alliance for the Bay is a great example of this. They work very closely with dairy farmers and other parts of the ag community. They're probably most well known for working with Turkey Hill farmers that provide your Turkey Hill ice cream. but they are working very closely to address some of those needs. And then partnerships. Throughout this region, we have what's called the 4R, MidAtlantic Partnership, and that's a partnership among nonprofits, the Maryland Grain Association, ag providers, and then the farmers themselves to address their issues. Next. So my final slide is just, to encourage you to partner with your local farming community, include them in your conversations, engage with individuals at USDA, NRCS, your state's Department of Agriculture, your local soil conservation districts, extension staff, nonprofits, to understand what their programs are and how they may be engaged and helpful to some of your other planning objectives. And with that, just thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I lost my mouse on my screen. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing. And Nancy, thank you for setting the stage for the rest of our speakers. That's such a great opportunity. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. And while she's getting ready, I will just remind everyone, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, continue, and we will address them after all of the speakers have been have completed. So looks like Jennifer is off and running. I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Leah, and thanks for inviting me to present today. My name is Jennifer Clifford. I'm with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets and the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee. I oversee our climate resilient, farming grant program, our CRF program, and I'm going to talk broadly about New York State as well as focus in on this CRF program. So this is just a snapshot of agriculture in New York State. We do have diversified agriculture. We do have a good portion of dairy as well as diversified crops. And this is from our 2017 ag census. So a lot to cover across the state, and our CRF program views farms through the lens of every farm being eligible, as far as every farm needing to reduce their greenhouse gases, and every farm is impacted by climate change. So our approach to agriculture and our programs is that well-managed agriculture is really sustainable development. We have local food and beverage, horticulture, fiber, forest products, therapeutics, and energy, all are plus more, all things that rely on agriculture. So it touches a lot of parts of our lives, our communities, our economy. It supports rural economic growth with locally based transactions, supports jobs, the tax base is supported. Conservation and resiliency is impacted greatly by well-supported agriculture. Agriculture can support habitat and wildlife corridors, unpaved open space, resiliency for extreme storms and drought. Ag is really green infrastructure on a broad landscape scale, supports and is integral in our water and air quality, as well as soil health and soil function. Greenhouse gas mitigation is an important part of, and agriculture is an important piece of greenhouse gas mitigation. Recycling, as well as tourism, scenic vistas, agricultural vistas, agrotourism is popular, and quality of life is impacted by all of these things. So some climate observations for the Northeast. Overall, we're experiencing warmer and wetter climate. More of our total annual rain comes in these downpours that create some devastating effects like the pictures here. We are experiencing more dry spells in between, with wetter winters and springs, and drier summers and falls. So all of this is really just less moderation, less predictability, and that's difficult for our agricultural sector. In 2019 in New York State, they passed, legislature passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. This really set a broad and aggressive target to reduce New York State's economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and no less than 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels. So this is a snapshot of our greenhouse gas inventory statewide, and agriculture accounts for 6%, a large portion of that being from methane from dairy manure and enteric fermentation from dairy. And methane being a very potent greenhouse gas, it's very important. We're taking it very serious that we need to reduce those levels of methane. The ag sector is really being seen as an important integral part of our greenhouse gas targets as well, because not only is greenhouse or is agriculture a place where we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but we can also increase our carbon sequestration. So some of the reduction strategies for our emissions rely on or are centered around nutrient management, reducing nitrous oxide emissions while achieving crop yield and quality goals through continued and expanded nutrient management, manure management, preventing or reducing methane emissions from manure management practices, precision feeding, herd and forage management, reducing methane and nitrous oxide emissions while achieving growth and milk production goals, and perhaps some additional methane emission reductions from future feed additives. Carbon sequestration strategies for forests and farms include avoided conversion of forests and farmland. We have some farmland protection grant programs, as well as planning programs for grant programs to support planning efforts at the municipal level for agriculture. Forest management, we have a forest or a tree planting goal in New York State that aligns with our forestry goals and carbon sequestration goals. Soil health is a huge part of our goal set to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration. It's also very integral in adaptation for farms and becoming more resilient to these unpredictable storm events. Agroforestry is an integral strategy we're utilizing. We're adding more trees to the agricultural production. Reforestation and afforestation, and then a climate-focused bioeconomy. So in New York State, we have the Agricultural Environmental Management Framework. This is something we had prior to the goals that we've set forth related to climate. So this is a framework that we've had in place in New York State for some time that works with our local soil and water districts within each county to provide conservation technical assistance through a planning framework, and then also provide cost share assistance funding with farmers to implement best management practice systems. And it really aligns closely with NRCS's, the USDA NRCS planning process for conservation as well. And we work really closely with NRCS in New York State, and many of our farms utilize our state programs and our federal programs, such as EQIP. So I mentioned, and I appreciate Nancy mentioning soil and water districts. We work very close with our local soil and water conservation districts within each county. We have 58 across this state. They are authorized under state law and are non-regulatory, but are implementation based and partnership driven and really watershed focused. They're within each county, but we have several watershed coalitions, and knowing that many water quality issues and flood and drought issues really do not abide by our municipal boundaries. So partnerships are very integral. So our climate resilient farming grant program, the next part of my presentation really kind of focuses on this program that was created to reduce the impact of agriculture on climate change and to increase the resiliency of New York State farms in the face of a changing climate. So the goal is really kind of that snapshot goal is to greenhouse gas mitigation, carbon sequestration, adaptation, all with the thought of farm viability in mind. So our CRF program was launched in 2015. We've had 8 rounds of funding so far. With approximately 69 million awarded to 570 farms across the state. We've had an approximate 574,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalents per year in estimated emissions reductions. This includes 29 cover and flare projects to date, manure storage cover and flare projects, which I'm going to do a little deeper dive into. So we fund, under our grant program, we fund several tracks of projects just to help have like projects be reviewed against like projects. So we fund projects related to livestock management, alternative manure management, and precision feed management, adaptation and resiliency, healthy soils and why, and actually new to, as of round 8, agricultural forest management. So under that track 1, this is just kind of a list of some of the types of systems that we help farms implement on site. So a manure storage cover and flare type of system, as well as other manure management, best management practices. So a manure storage cover and flare is really just exactly what it sounds like. It's a cover that is put over a open manure storage to capture the methane that is produced. And then that methane is then either flared off, like you can see in the photo here, there's a small flare, or it can also be utilized, captured and utilized for energy. So why do we support this type of practice? It reduces methane emissions. An agricultural waste storage cover and flare system has the capacity to not only reduce emissions on farm, but it also has a big impact on the farm's resiliency to major precipitation events. It eliminates millions of gallons of clean rainwater from entering a manure storage, which mitigates water quality concerns, especially during these unpredictable major precipitation events that we're experiencing. It can also reduce the fuel usage and the emissions associated with spreading the millions of gallons of rainwater annually. So this is a picture of a manure storage in Cayuga County. That was, and so that was the before, and this is the now with the cover installed and a flare you can see off to the side. So this farm has some additional infrastructure on site where they are capturing and utilizing some of that methane to create biogas, but they also have a flare as well, not only a fail-safe, but just to utilize some of or to combust some of the methane that isn't being used. So they also take, you can see some of the rainwater collecting on the cover here. And so the resiliency and adaptation aspect of this is that now that water is not going into the storage and mixing with the manure, which not only dilutes the manure, which then reduces the potency of this fertilizer and nutrient source, but then that rainwater doesn't have to be planned for as far as taking up space in the storage, as well as how to or the management strategy and plan for emptying the storage when they spread manure on fields. So this is another picture of a manure storage cover going in Ontario County on an existing. Oh, and then you can see the green structure in the background is an existing methane digester that was already on farm. That's not something we don't fund methane digesters. We support the cover and flare and components of some of those types of systems. And so this is just another type of flare. So methane, this is important strategy for New York State because methane is a more potent greenhouse gas. So by combusting it into carbon dioxide, we're actually reducing the emissions that are associated with this manure storage. So under track 2, we fund adaptation and resiliency types of projects. A lot of these types of projects are related around water management. Some include riparian buffer systems, stream corridor and shoreline management, a lot of erosion and sediment control, and then even some types of green infrastructure practices are supported through our program. So improved water management on farms through the implementation of conservation systems can significantly enhance a farm's resiliency to the impacts of climate change in both times of drought and flood. And our conservation systems, such as transferring land to perennial production, as well as in implementing forest buffers, can also create beneficial carbon sinks. So this was a water management project that we did fund, and this was a before picture of a field that is just having some consistent flooding issues. And this is an after photo where a diversion, in this photo, you can see a diversion is actually under construction here. And then a grassed waterway was implemented to just help divert the water and allow the fields not to just be inundated. So divert it, slow it down, allow for infiltration. Some other through track 3, these are our soil health projects. We support a lot of soil health projects on farm. Soil health can really enhance a farm's resiliency to the impacts of climate change. Improving soil health can add or increase the soil capacity or the soil's ability to have higher water holding capacity. So it can improve with drought and flood conditions by improved soil health practices. So we cost share soil health practices at a per acre rate for multiple year terms, and we actually cost share soil health practices through several of our cost share programs. And as well as we have some targeted watershed cost share programs we provide. Outreach is integral to all of our projects and programs. We do offer outreach or cost share assistance for outreach at a 100% cost share, because we do believe it is an important piece of a lot of projects. When farms can see farm to farm examples or farm to farm outreach events where they can come out and talk about a practice, we have seen that has really helped increase adoption in a region. Creating coalitions, or even just just kind of farmer-led groups on soil health and or watershed related topics has been a big way to help increase outreach and increase adoption of these practices. And then we've also supported our local Cornell Cooperative Extension and Cornell researchers, as well as supporting soil health trailers for outreach and other practices like that to help really just allow for on-the-ground discussions to occur. We use Comet Planner for all of our greenhouse gas reduction estimates, and then we also support soil health testing for farms and to help them benchmark and as well as track progress over time. So these are some cover crop pictures. You can see the cover, some stubble left from harvest, and then the cover crop coming up. We also support prescribed rotational grazing. This is a before picture. And then this is an after photo where we supported fencing, planting, and then water infrastructure. And this is the cows on the pasture. So track 4 is actually new to our program. This is just something we just newly awarded or newly added to round 8, and round 8 of our program we just awarded this past September. So we haven't seen any of these projects come to fruition yet. The photo here is actually a picture of a Wallkill River floodplain bench project that was funded under a water management project where they're actually taking some ag land and giving it back to the floodplain, as well as moving some like access roads to help give back to the floodplain. And you can see these trees here are an area that was not was not part of the floodplain, and now is helping to reduce the amount of flooding that farms and the whole community is experiencing along the Wallkill River. So that's really a landscape-wide project where it's not just farms and agriculture involved, but it's the whole community is impacted because water doesn't really abide by our boundaries. So that's actually the end of my slides. But I did see that there were a couple, oh, if I'm not over time, I'll just add a little okay, so I did see, okay, I did see a few comments about some things that folks were interested in learning about. So I did just also want to mention that we have, we do have, recently have tried to expand our definition of our eligible agriculture to open it up to urban and community gardens. We received some feedback from our soil and water districts that this is an area that they're getting interest in and could help support. So that's something that we're trying to expand our reach to, knowing that agriculture is not just in a rural setting. And then we also have in New York State, we have some consumer marketing programs that help connect, specifically our New York Grown and Certified program helps connects farms that are utilizing sustainable best management practices to consumers in the grocery store, and these products are labeled with New York Grown and Certified if these farms follow in our agricultural environmental management program and follow some other requirements for safe food handling. And then we also, through our CRF program, help to fund innovative practices. We want some ideas and feedback. That's been very helpful to our program is just listening to what the feedback from our applicants and feedback from farmers and feedback from the state. And so we have, funded in innovative practices like the use of biochar as a soil health amendment, and trying to understand the benefits of that on fields as well. So just some different things. A lot of it is in the lens of greenhouse gas reduction, but there is so much overlap with resiliency and adaptation with all of those practices and co-benefits that we really just try and do highlight those and learn more about those as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing about what's happening in New York State. Appreciate it. So during this transition, I'm going to ask Jennifer to stop sharing and we will get Mike Roth's presentation up. I think I misspoke earlier. If you have questions, if you could put them in the Q&A, not in the chat, although I will be reading them both in case you've already done one. I will find it. You do not have to ask it again. I would appreciate it. So at this point, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about what's happening in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Leah, and thank you all so much for joining this conversation today. I'm going to take a slightly different approach to some of the things I share with you from the Pennsylvania perspective. I was housed within the the Pittsburgh planning office when I was a Resilience AmeriCorps Vista, so I can't speak your language, but I know some of the terms, so hopefully I can help do some translating between the ag world in the planning world and think about some considerations as we move forward here in the future. So just to give you a high-level overview of Pennsylvania ag, we have 7.3 million acres in agriculture, so about a quarter of Pennsylvania is in agriculture. And I will just note the rest of it is mostly forest land. So we do consider the forest industry also under agriculture. So just to give you that perspective. Obviously, significant economic output and jobs as well here in Pennsylvania. We rank fairly high in some areas that probably would not come to mind. So we're #1 in mushrooms for the United States, #1 in hardwoods, and also a leader in many other areas as well. And probably most relevant to the conversation today, we are #1 in farmland preservation. So that is land that is permanently preserved as farmland in perpetuity. However, despite being #1 in that category, we are seeing unprecedented pressures against farmland going into things like low density housing, warehousing, and other things like that. So obviously everything has to happen in balance. But I will just say, I hope one of the takeaways here from myself and the other presenters is that it's absolutely critical that we have farmland so that we can produce food and have climate smart practices be deployed. And one of the concerns we have here in Pennsylvania is that our farms are very small. So like the other speakers, I would say the Northeast is similar in the fact that our farms are very small, but they're diversified in what they do in their operations. So a lot of the Northeast, as well as in Virginia, the farms that we see there don't have the luxury of getting bigger to stay in the game. So when we talk about farms in the Midwest, it usually just means you get more acres under you and you continue to be competitive. So when it comes to our farms, we really need to be creative with how we support them, whether it's doing things like organic or regenerative ag or implementing new technologies, as was mentioned previously. So we just need to be mindful that the agriculture that we're talking about is a little bit different than what you might see, on TV as classical ag. So many of you may not have exposure to agriculture, but I often, when I talk to folks, or I go home and talk to folks, talk to the family, I either get one of these two reactions: either, oh, farming, that's so cute, there's all the cute animals, and it's so perfect and picturesque. And then I have the other side of folks who see it as dirty or a problem, or a detriment to the climate, those sort of things. Again, these are perceptions, and they seem to beat reality when it comes to people's minds. But I will just say there's a lot more to it than these two perceptions, and I think we can really have agriculture steer us in a really positive direction. So my argument here for you today is that the reality of agriculture is it can be the keystone for community resilience, for decarbonization efforts, and most importantly to my work, meeting the triple bottom line. So helping the people, planet, and profit, so that we can continue to have healthy and vibrant communities. So pictured here, I do have a very large digester. And for those that don't know, a digester takes manure and food waste and turns it into energy that can go onto the grid. So I just wanted to showcase that. And then to the right, just in case folks aren't familiar with it, controlled environment agriculture, or CEA, is a different form of agriculture that is sort of come in vogue recently, but it's not new, where we're growing things either indoors or under glass. But the key is that the environment that it's grown in is controlled. So just wanted to share two of those, but we'll get into why this would be helpful for communities and decarbonization in triple bottom line here. So as Jennifer had mentioned, the other takeaway here is that be careful not to have a knee-jerk reaction to thinking, oh, anything ag, or if I hear farm, or if I hear food production, that it's automatically rural. That is certainly not the case, and that's not the case here in Pennsylvania. It's obviously important to understand the rural context of situations, but you can't think of agriculture just being a rural activity. It's something that impacts the entire system we have in our civilization. It impacts the most urban centers to the most rural areas that we have. So I would just encourage you all to flatten the boxes of where do you put agriculture, and just see it as another piece of critical infrastructure, just like we would energy, like we would hospital systems. It's another piece of critical infrastructure that can take place anywhere. So, and the other thing we like to say here in Pennsylvania is it truly is zip code neutral. So, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So being that you're planners and thinking about how communities work and sort of the process flows, I hope this translates well into your world. I try to think about what I do on a daily basis and how that might carry over. But what I want to show you here is just that, again, back to my call that agriculture can help with decarbonization, the triple bottom line, climate, all sorts of different things. I think we often see different facilities as their own silos, forgive the pun there, but we often see these things as completely separate entities that just are different pieces of our communities that just happen, and there's not really a connection. So why would we ever think that a energy generation facility would have anything to do with a dairy barn? Probably on our daily basis we wouldn't consider those two things interrelated, besides maybe the energy that's sent to the dairy farm. But I would encourage you to think about things in this greater system. So, business as usual, we're usually putting a fossil fuel into a facility. I have a number listed here. And the externality that comes out of those facilities. So, the coal-fired power plant, we have CO2. I say this very bluntly, we throw our hands in the air and say, oh, that's just the externality of doing that activity. Same thing, dairy facility, we use a lot of diesel to move milk and, move different things for the ag industry. And obviously, as was mentioned previously, the dairy, well, any sort of bovine is going to produce methane from the food they eat. And we say, oh, well, that's the externality of that activity. And we just don't really have an answer for that. So I have that with the other two here. I won't go through those. But again, we have externalities and liabilities with no dollar amount. So we just accept it for what it is. What I would encourage you to think about is how agriculture not only can decarbonize itself, can not only reduce, the climate impacts that itself has, but it can be aggressive and address them and mitigate the externalities of other businesses as well. So I just want to highlight here thinking about what does agriculture in the future look like? Well, you could have a hardwoods operation that is harvesting, wood and take the waste scraps to produce biochar. Well, one of the, externalities or productions that come out of the making of biochar is energy. So you could put energy from burning waste wood, which again, I probably should have taken a step back, the importance of having good harvesting practices in forest. We're a little bit different than what you might see the pictures of the Amazon being bulldozed or something like that. There are sustainable ways that we can use our forest resource and have circular carbon economies. So maybe a discussion for another time. But jumping back to the chart here, you also look at the dairy facility. Well, we could use that methane for energy production. So could we send that renewable natural gas into the energy system to then be to help decarbonize other industries? And as well, one of the after results of taking that methane off of the effluent that we get from the dairy industry is now you have a domestic fertilizer source that does not have the same carbon impact that it otherwise would if it was just sort of raw applied. But we think about this in a lot of different ways, with whether it's something as simple as most energy generation facilities give a lot of waste heat. Could you take that waste heat and send it to a controlled environment ag facility that do need to control their temperature inside their facilities? So I posed this to you, and I know it's probably a lot if this is your first time sort of diving into the ag world, but there's all these interconnections with agriculture that can really help, I think, greater society deal with some of our greatest challenges. So whether that's carbon storage, methane mitigation, sourcing biogenic CO2, we will be burning that methane. That means there will be CO2. Well, now you have CO2 from a natural process that can go to the medical industry, that can go to the beverage industry, that would otherwise be coming from fossil fuels. So I just wanted to share that sort of concept with you here. So the question is, does that crazy drawing that Michael did, does that exist? Well, the short answer is yes. And I've been very fortunate to be able to see the system in practice in a number of different places. And one that I had the great fortune of seeing this past summer was in Denmark. So the Danish government banned food waste from going to landfill since 1997. So obviously you're thinking, well, what are you going to do with all that food waste? Well, they're doing the proactive stuff that I feel like we here in the US talk about a lot, but are struggling to accomplish. So one example of what they do with it is residents can just put their food waste in bags. There can be glass, there can be metal. It doesn't really matter. All of it can go to these very advanced sorting facilities that do an incredible job of having clean food waste be separated out from the plastic and the other metals and things like that. That then goes to large regional digesters. So these are digesters that take both manure and food waste, and they produce significant amounts of methane that go to the energy grid, as well as now a domestic supply of fertilizer that again can sort of fall into that cyclical system where the farms can make more food, the people that consume it, as well as use the energy from these farms. And you might say, well, that sounds great, but is that just a pilot? So the good news is this is at scale. So as of right now, Denmark, all of their natural gas, 40% of it comes from agriculture, and they're slated to hit 100% by 2030. So you're talking about a fully, triple bottom line circular economy model that exists at scale. So it's something certainly to look forward to. Another location that I would bring attention to is the Netherlands. Really interesting example here. And again, from a city planning or regional planning perspective, it really is going to take professionals like you to pull these things off. But just to give this example here, the Port of Rotterdam has a lot of heavy industry right next to it. Obviously, there's the advantage of being close to shipping. But what's interesting is a lot of that heavy industry, whether it's cement or metal making, produces a lot of heat. All that heat and the CO2 that they capture from those processes go into a district heating system. So I know district heating is there's a few examples of that here in the US, but they utilize it to transport this waste heat and waste CO2 to the truly incredibly sized CEA industry in the Netherlands. And to give you a sense of how big the impact of the greenhouse operations in the Netherlands it's that the country is about the size of Maryland, but they're the second largest exporter of food behind the United States as far as value. So a lot of the specialty crops, tomatoes, peppers, things like that, are coming from a nation the size of Maryland, and that's because they have these greenhouse operations. So they're able to decarbonize or at least benefit from the negative externalities that we typically see as liabilities from heavy industry that are nearby or co-located with these CEA facilities to have a co-benefit. Additionally, there's a lot of the power generation facilities in the Netherlands are utilizing wood waste, just like we could be using here in Pennsylvania. We, again, lead the nation in hardwoods. We have a lot of residual wood that just sits out in the forest and eventually will just go back into the atmosphere or be a fire risk. So we could be using that to create both heat and CO2 for industry. But again, we could capture that CO2 and that excess heat and use it to grow food. So again, really great opportunities to see these examples, but I encourage you all to take a look at them as well. So now I think you might be thinking, well, what about here in the States? What are we doing? So I'm sure there are many examples to pull from, but I will say there's some really clear, I would argue, clear examples of how we could be collaborating. And as we think as in your roles as planners, how do we make this work a little bit easier? Because it's not the traditional, cookie cutter stamp, this type of operation here and this one here. This is going to be very complex. But one example of that is obviously we know cement is a very carbon intensive manufacturing process, and the energy source is typically a fossil fuel. Well, what if we're able to co-locate or be close by with an anaerobic digester? So now you're dealing with food waste, keeping out of the landfill, you're dealing with manure, you're dealing with nutrient management, but at the same time you're sending a drop-in fuel. Renewable natural gas is chemically exactly the same as natural gas, but it is biogenically sourced. That can go directly into the cement plant and help them, while at the same time the CO2 from the cement plant, like I said before, could be going to another agricultural process. Again, another perhaps natural fit is data centers. We see those popping up everywhere, and they certainly have their challenges and environmental footprints. But one way that we might be able to lessen sort of the blow of that is that the waste heat from these facilities could be going to controlled environment ag facilities so that they don't have to use fossil fuels or other intensive materials for their heating needs. And I think we saw a very clear example of this co-location sort of concept with the recent announcement of the reactivation of 3 Mile Island to support the Microsoft data centers for their AI projects here in Pennsylvania. But I would argue agriculture can serve a very supportive role in these same sort of concepts as well. So coming back to PA Department of Ag and thinking, well, how does the Department of Ag, how would they interact with us planners? There's some very basic things here. So in the conservation world, we have a very great program called the Dirt and Gravel Road Program. And as you can see, there's an example here that used to be just a pipe that was covered up with soil. And obviously, this is a much more climate resilient, more ecologically sound practice of having these very wide open bridges and more rural roads in areas. So for anyone that works in the rural areas, hopefully, if you're in Pennsylvania, you do have access to the Dirt and Gravel Road Program. And if not, I'm sure there's something comparable to that in your state. As others had mentioned, we do have numbers of different programs regarding soil health. And soil health is incredibly important to managing not only nutrients, but water. So one thing I'm sure people have seen the quote before, but each 1% increase in the soil organic matter helps hold 20,000 gallons more water per acre. So as I think it was Nancy who mentioned, we can at scale on the landscape manage, flooding and things like that. That's definitely something to consider. And of course, on the agriculture side, I touched on the energy, but we have lots of materials that could be going into energy and supporting that circular economy, whether it's rendering plants, it's wood waste, it's, wide variety of things. We're exploring also, shoulder crops that can support energy. So crops that aren't going to compete with food, like cover crops that could be going to energy as well. And then obviously we can directly work with you on farmland preservation. What I would say we'll need from you, and certainly appreciate your thoughts on how this might happen, is thinking about the flexibility and support we can have for creative new ideas and innovative agriculture integration into our typical community designs and layouts. And then also we want to be mindful of future-proofing our designs and layouts for communities so that they can take advantage of these opportunities with agriculture. So I'll try and speed up here a little bit. Just wanted to also call out, I know the planning often doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of designing buildings and things like that. That's more the architecture realm. But I do want to say, I think there's obvious benefits to planning and architecture working together to design resilient communities. And one way we can do that is utilizing agricultural materials in the built environment. So 2 examples here. This was an affordable housing that we did here in Pennsylvania using hempcrete. So that's mixing hemp with lime and water. And it results in a fire-resistant, pest-resistant, and carbon-storing material that is truly incredible to see in person. And obviously supports a regional economy instead of getting foam from somewhere else for insulation. The reason I bring that up, though, from a resiliency standpoint, when you look at fire resistance, or unfortunately, Pennsylvania is in one of the worst fire seasons it's had. 90% of homes are damaged by the embers from a wildfire. They never actually get touched by the fires themselves. So not only does the design of a community inherent to its resilience, but I think the material choice as well can do things like that fire resistance I mentioned with hemp can help protect communities both at the micro level and at the macro level. And at the bottom here, you can see cross-laminated timber. So that's a new process where you can take timber and replace things like steel for some medium-sized buildings for structural reasons. And then just a quick call out as we're thinking about communities. I know LEED is starting to get into the community world. LEED version 5 stresses incredibly the ecological impact of your building, decarbonization, quality of life for the building owner and inhabitant, and is giving points for resilience. So I would just say if there's any opportunities to work with your friends in the architecture realm as you're designing communities or trying to drive communities forward, agriculture can be an answer for that. So just to wrap up here, the good news is Governor Shapiro sees agriculture as one of the 5 pillars of his economic development plan. And we currently are just wrapped up the first round of our agriculture innovation grant program, which can help with those co-location, those innovative ideas and things like that. So with that, thank you. And I will turn it back to Leah. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to hear what's happening here in Pennsylvania. I am a houser in my field, and I can appreciate the need for permitting update for everywhere. It is a pet peeve of mine. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and let her keep us moving and getting towards the end of this webinar. So Susan, off to you.
I will try and get us caught up. I just want to say hi. I forgot to turn my camera on earlier. So hi, everyone. Susan Parry, and I'll turn my video off and share my presentation. And you can tell me when you see the slideshow. Whoops. Okay, are you seeing my slideshow?
Yep,
Yes.
You're good to go.
Give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Again, my name's Susan Parry. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships. So it's a big bucket, and I've been with the agency for many years. So I wanted to just introduce everyone again to NRCS. Thank you, Jennifer, for the shout out more than once about NRCS. We are part of USDA. And I'll go into a little bit about the different agencies, but what is NRCS? We started in the Dust Bowl, believe it or not. Our first chief was Hugh Hammond Bennett, who was a great conservationist. So we were first the Soil Erosion Service. Again, they were concerned about the Dust Bowl and causing that soil loss. And then we moved from Soil Conservation Service to Natural Resource Conservation Service. So what we do is address what we call resource concerns. Resource concerns are those things that are inherent to life: soil, water, plants, air quality, wildlife habitat, all those things that we value. So they are things that we take very seriously. We are a voluntary agency. We do not ever say you must do this, you must do that. We work with farmers and growers and landowners on a voluntary basis based on their personal and operational goals while balancing the need to respect the land. Our first responsibility with the taxpayer dollars is to protect the land. So we take that very seriously. We have field offices all over the nation and almost in every county. Now we just moved into Philadelphia. This is our first urban center in Pennsylvania, is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we're trying to advocate for a conservation district there too, a soil and water district. So we've been in Philadelphia for a year. We've just opened an office in Pittsburgh as well. So urban is something new for us, but what we do is conservation planning. And when I heard of certified planners, we have certified conservation planners. So a little bit like municipal planning, but we do focus on conservation. We do resource concern evaluations. We assess soil health. We go out on the farm and make recommendations. We can provide free maps, soils, topographic maps. We do PNDI searches for farmers a lot of times, and we do engineering designs as well. We provide technical assistance, and I won't read through all that. And we'll go into financial programs as well, but we plan out the practices per the grower's goal. Again, so we're all voluntary. So as far as technical assistance, we put a lot into training our field planners. They go through trainings every single year, and we have a certification program that bar none is, I think, top of the line for those that need to be out in the field working with people. We provide recommendations all the time to improve sustainability and resilience. Someone mentioned those words and what they mean to different people, but we see a conservation plan as really the map of opportunities for that grower, for that landowner. What do they want to do with what they're steward of? So we do have a high workload in Pennsylvania. As you know, we are an agricultural state, as Mike pointed out, first in many ways, and we do have a high workload. So we have field office staff. We are fully staffed up. We have about 230 employees around the state for now. I'm sorry, that was kind of a joke. But our services are always free and confidential. We do not share personal information at all. Financial assistance. Someone mentioned EQIP. Our Environmental Quality Incentives Program is one of our largest funded programs. I think we spent about 36 million this year on doing ones who have, and again, I refer to resource concerns. So these are serious resource concerns. We go out there and help to address those things, like this barnyard you see that might have been mud. We help to formalize that barnyard, add manure storage and lanes for walking cattle, and we work in the field all the time. We also have other programs that reward folks that are doing a good job. Our premier program for that is Conservation Stewardship Program. I had a farmer once call it a green payment, where he met a level of stewardship that was above most. So then that payment adds more efficiency to the operation, and we give a flat payment for that. We give higher incentive payments available for those what we call historically underserved, which can be beginning farmers, veterans. Beginners are less than 10 years. We also cover all the minority groups. So a lot of times with our ranking, when someone applies and they're within a minority group that has experienced bias in the past, we give extra points, and I'm using quotations, extra points in our ranking process for that. And a landowner can come in and apply to any of our service centers. So that's in the nutshell what we do. So what's this connection between agriculture and our changing climate? I liked Mike's one graphic, but again, the cows poop. So livestock, we're a large livestock state, and we do a lot of intensive cropping. Corn and soybeans are fairly intensive, and they release a lot of methane, not methane on the corn, but the cows release methane, carbon dioxide, and a nitrous oxide comes from the fields. So there's solutions for most every one of those, and part of that graphic goes into some of those, and Jennifer and Mike did a great job in going over some of those. So we offer a very broad suite of voluntary practices. Hold on just one second. And And we have identified a subset of those practices, I think, in our field office technical guide, which is the scientific name for what we have in our practice suite or our toolbox. There's about 300 practices, but a subset of those are critical to climate change mitigation. And here you see a couple of statements from our website that we look for climate smart and water quality agronomic practices. We focus on livestock and barnyard management and riparian restoration and protection. Those are the main goals for climate change mitigation practices. When these are applied appropriately, they're expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration. That's the whole goal of that. And they also help operations to build their resilience. So that's an important point that's made. And we also focus on, as Jennifer said, soil health, water quality, pollinator and wildlife habitat for climate change mitigation. So the categories under our climate smart agricultural practices are all in these categories. I won't read each of those since we're low on time, but again, you can see all of those, and hopefully you'll be provided the presentations, but it runs the gamut of different things that we could do to support landowners to do the right thing and to fight climate change. We're all in it together. So this is our mitigation activity list, and you can find that on our website. Just a couple of the practices, and I'll go into a few of them. This is our emergency watershed program. I'll go into that a little bit. Really is directly helps homeowners. We recently had emergency or disaster declarations in the northern tier. So we're helping up there. We have money for homeowners who find themselves in that category that this stream has completely encroached into their property. Here you see a poultry litter gasification, and certainly no-till and tree plantings, grazing, and forestry. Those are our main categories. So what NRCS does with partners is to collaborate on our practices to address climate resilience. We utilize scientifically driven. We work a lot with Extension, who does the research that then informs our practices, and we update our practices every 5 years. We look at them and look at this current science to see if we're doing what the farmers need, and we take farmer feedback all the time too. We collaborate on funding to minimize out-of-pocket expenses for farmers. And we also provide technical trainings, and we do quality assurance reviews for conservation districts. And we work very closely with the State Conservation Commission and the PA Department of Agriculture. We work with RC&D councils, Resource Conservation and Development councils that are in many of the states, and consultants. We're working currently with Land Studies on a legacy sediment project, as well as HRG. We're working on a climate change project with them. So we do a lot with outside agencies as well. So in terms of partnerships and ideas for you all, we have 27 distinct agencies. Again, NRCS is only one. We have rural development. Someone asked about local and regional food systems in terms of resiliencies. Ag Marketing Service leads the effort for food system grants. They provide grants and guidance on how to connect with the local and regional food systems. So there's all kinds of different ways that municipal planners can work with us, and some specific work with municipalities has included flood prevention and mitigation. We do dam rehab projects throughout the state. We do business and homeowner grants and loans for community facilities through rural development. And I'm in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, and there's one municipality in Cumberland County that is now become more active in farmland preservation. They've gone to all the farms in their municipality and asked them to preserve. And they actually floated a bond issue and ended up with funding of their own. But we have an agricultural conservation easement program that can provide additional match funding to the state, to the county, and to local entities to preserve which again, if you look at it in a good way, it's to buy the development rights on farmland, forest land, and wetlands in PA. So anywhere that you see that sort of work being done, chances are that we're involved and providing state funding to the state through the Farmland Preservation Program, through Department of Ag or others. And the other thing that you all can do is just to promote conservation everywhere to everyone every day. I just threw in some pictures there of our plant before and after of our riparian area that we've worked on. We do a community garden program called the People's Garden Initiative, and support tree plantings. I know Chesapeake Bay, Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and the foundation, we're doing the 10,000,001 trees. We've been involved in that and can pay for the plant materials as well. So just real quick, the Emergency Watershed Protection Program is one that has done a tremendous amount of work. I think we're up to like 80 some projects throughout the state that is directly, it has to have a municipal sponsor. So this is how the program works. There's a natural event like flooding, again, effective climate change. There's an impairment in the watershed. There's an imminent threat to the public. And then we claim that it's an emergency, or the state deems that it's an emergency. And then we can come in and provide funding for those permanent structures and public utilities or dams for flood control. So that's just a real quick nutshell of that. And then I was asked to promote rural development, other community facilities and equipment loans. I think someone mentioned fire stations, and that's where I think of rural development, and it is a population of 20,000 or less, but they are expanding their program offerings. So don't count them out as far as wherever you're located. They are an essential service to the local community, and they have what they call low interest loans. I think when I looked at it, it was 4% for a community to get funding for a facility for up to 35 years. So it really is a great program. So again, look up all of the programs under USDA and think about how you might think out of the box and help your own community. That's really all I had. I think I went really fast there, but I wanted to catch us up so there's time for questions and comments. So there's my information, and hopefully they'll provide the slides, and you all can contact us or look on the web and look up some more resources. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Susan. And to follow up, yes, we will be sharing the slides with all of the participants. We did answer all of the questions in the Q&A. So if you asked a question, you should have received an answer. And I don't see anything additional in the chat at this point. So what I will say is a couple wrap-ups. One, thank you immensely to our presenters for being here. Thank you to the audience for participating and being a part of this event. If you are here because you really need CM credits, I'm going to put in the chat a webinar in Pennsylvania for law credits. That's a fun one that everyone tends to wait until the very end to get. You can hear me moderate that one in a couple weeks. We're really excited to have you. The next webinar series in this event will not be until 2025. So we wish you all a very happy holidays through the end of the year. And it will be focused on housing, which for me is great because that's what I do. This was very interesting to me because I don't get to live in the ag world regularly. So I learned a ton about what's happening in Pennsylvania here just in my backyard. So I appreciate the messages and all of the work that you guys do in this really critical part of our ecosystem in our world. So I will just say thank you again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jillian to wrap everything up.
Thank you, Leah, and a huge thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate your contribution to this series. This topic, unique to Leah, was also, I think, unique to our webinar series. So I'm glad that we were able to share these insights. All attendees, thank you very much for joining today. Please keep your eyes peeled on your inboxes. A follow-up e-blast will go out to all attendees, hopefully mid next week, with the recording, the slide decks, and all of our all the contact information for all of our speakers. But with that being said, thank you everybody for joining. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their afternoon.
Thanks again.
Thank you.